This video is made possible by Second Call Defense. Second Call Defense provides immediate, upfront legal protection for a member who is forced to use any legal weapon for self-defense. So protect yourself today with Second Call Defense. I did. You'll find the link in the description. Hi, I'm Joel Persinger. I'm the Gun Guy. Thank you very much for all of your support of GunGuyTV and the fact that you watch the videos. I really appreciate it. Make sure that you're checking out also the audio podcast. If you look on your favorite podcast player, you'll find the GunGuyTV audio podcast. You'll also find a video version on Rumble. I will go ahead and put a link in the description for that, as well as my other channels, the Practical Defense Systems channel and my spiritual blog. You'll find all the links in the description. All right, I've got an interview today with Dan O'Kelly from gunlearn.com. You probably know Dan very well if you've been watching my show, and we're going to talk about what's going on with rare breed triggers and ATF deciding they want to crack down on the force reset trigger. Even before we start, I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's going to work out as well for ATF as they think it is, but let's find out from the expert. Here's Dan. Dan, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm very, very grateful. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, particularly the FRS trigger and what ATF is doing there. You know me, I print things because I'm old, and printed out a couple of things, this goofy memo that they sent out, which I guess Gun Owners of America got a hold of, and then the assuming the accompanying articles that came out is one from AmmoLand, and there's others that talked about that. I know you've read into this a little bit. What exactly is going on with ATF? Since I've, as we've discussed, I've taken your class. I know that force reset triggers are not machine guns according to the classification, and yet it seems that wasn't too long ago, a few weeks ago, if it's been that ATF apparently notified law enforcement that they were machine guns, and now they're essentially on the confiscation route here. What's happening?
As far as that email, is it legitimate? It seems to be, at least if ATF is in fact seizing forced reset triggers, and I understand they hit at least one FFL in Illinois. And then again, if that's valid, if that's actually happened. But if they are, here's the thing. ATF is a bureaucracy. They exist to justify their own existence at the end of the day, to get a budget that's even bigger every year. They need to show Congress what they've done, and they do that by making arrests and prosecuting gun cases. If it's one thing for them to seize these things if they're out there taking the triggers, and it's another thing for them to indict people, to arrest people, to charge people in criminal court. And I don't see where that's been done. I don't know that anybody has ever been charged with a forced reset trigger nationwide. So it's sort of telling that, they're picking these things up, but yet they haven't charged anybody. Because if they had a case, if a federal prosecutor would take this, they'd be charging everybody they found with one. They charge everybody they find with Glock switches. They charge everybody they find with solvent traps, and charge them with silencers. I've had defense attorneys bring me a number of cases in both situations: solvent traps, Glock switches, you name it. But no forced reset triggers. So why would you be taking them if you can't prosecute them? And if you can prosecute them, why haven't you? Because you would be. This is me talking to ATF. So the fact that they're taking these and not prosecuting anyone, here's the deal. They don't want to lose in court, because that's even worse than not prosecuting somebody. It seems to me as though, hey, we can throw our weight around here and take these, because that's an administrative thing. We can seize these things as, quote, the fruit of a crime, as, quote, contraband, and, make somebody fight us to get it back. That's part of the reason that, according to that email, when they come take one, if they can get you to abandon it and sign off any rights to sue them back over that personal property, then that saves them paperwork down the road. Because anytime they seize something, whether it's administratively well, administratively. The other kind of seizure is judicial, and it doesn't apply here. If they seize something administratively, you have a right to file a claim to try to get it back, go through court procedures, and they don't want to deal with that. So maybe you'll just abandon it to them. But if you don't, the email says, well, we're going to seize it as contraband. They don't use that word, but contraband or fruit of the crime. I'll come up for air for a minute. It's just typical.
I think the thing that gets me is, fruit of what crime?
Well, that's it.
That's it. There's no crime. I mean, they're
possession of an unregistered machine gun, according to them, but yet it doesn't satisfy the definition. If it did, or if they thought they could prevail in court, they'd be arresting you. They'd be charging you and upping their stats. It would be a stat for the agent, for the office he works in, for the division it's part of, and for the agency as a whole. Yet they're not.
It's interesting. I was reading the memo, and the first time I read it, the little email, because we managed to get a copy of it here. It's floating around the internet. I read it, and I thought, I wonder if this is real, because it's not written very well. For example, you don't refer to someone who has not yet been charged with a crime as a defendant. You refer to them as a suspect. If you suspect them of a crime, you refer them to as a subject. If you're interviewing them or you're talking to them and you're not sure. But they're only defendants at some point when they've been charged with a crime by a Commonwealth attorney or district attorney or an AG somewhere. And yet there is no crime, according to the definition. And none of these folks are defendants because there's no crime that's charged. So it's interesting that they would use that term. I do think it's also interesting too. Anybody that's got an attorney, which obviously Rare Breed Triggers does, is not going to happily sign off on you taking all of their product and just abandon it. So there's going to be a court case on this if indeed they showed up and took it. But I cannot find anywhere in the news where that's actually happened. Are you aware of them actually showing up at Rare Breed Triggers and taking triggers from them? Because I haven't seen any evidence of that.
I haven't called Rare Breed in the last few days. I spoke to their owner a week or two ago, but I know the guy has a full plate. I didn't want to bother him. But according to their president, Lawrence DeMonico's video as of about 3 days ago, they still have not been raided. No one's been arrested. No. And, what's also telling about this case is, ATF, even though they're utterly wrong, again, to go back to the firearm framer receiver issue, and that's still coming. That's still in the process, which takes several years. It's coming. It's not an old dead issue. But ATF for decades would arrest someone for making and selling AR lowers or FAL uppers or what have you if they weren't licensed as a manufacturer, because ATF said, in our opinion, these things are firearm frames, even though they only satisfy half the definition. And since, the Robeson and Rowald cases, they've been put in their place and are now rewriting the definition. Yet even today, they're still arresting people for having those if they're a felon, even though it's not a firearm, if you're making them without a license. But ATF was taking action and is taking action in those situations. With this forced reset trigger issue, according to them, hey, this is a machine gun. We believe that. We know that to be a fact, but yet no arrests. Big difference there. What does that tell you? They know they can't win it. And, well, they didn't win the...
they didn't win the other one.
They didn't win the firearm.
Right.
You're right. They didn't win the other one. They had one against a lot of people who sat in jail, but they know what's coming on this one.
Yeah.
Myself and 3 other people testified already that no, these things are not machine guns. Anybody who can read a definition can see that no, they're not. And I believe that ATF knows. We prosecute people for these. The attorneys are going to hire these experts. They're going to testify. Look, no, they're not, Judge. Here's how they're not. They're going to lose the cases. But yet in the meantime, they're going to follow through and just take people's property. It's going to go a lot further.
So one question I do have about this is there's a lot of noise on the internet. about this, because obviously, as you know, anytime something like this happens, there's a ripple effect that goes along. It doesn't matter whether it's among YouTube commentators or websites or whatever. Everybody freaks out a bit. And I think there's been a lot of freaking out about this. Whether it's justified or not, I don't know. But part of this indicates that next step is to go banging perhaps on people's doors once they have a list of who bought these and collect them. And I suspect that those folks who have these, who own them, they're actually a legal item, but I mean, they bought them legally and they own them legally, might be sweating a little bit that ATF could be knocking on their door. Is that fall in line with something that they might actually do at some point?
Well, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that they're going to do that. They've already done it with the auto key card case. They've gone door to door to seize those or take abandonments. They've gone door to door to take solvent trap kits from companies that they've taken action against and said, okay, so anything you made is a silencer, it's not registered, it's contraband. So then they get their records and go door to door, same procedure. They've done it with the polymer 80 buy, build, shoot kits. They went door to door. Remember, it wasn't too long ago. I mean, that's standard procedure. This is only about how many times has it been? Yeah, that's happening next.
The concern, I think, there for most folks, including me, is that, look, if they go after the manufacturer and they try to shut down the manufacturer or seize the manufacturer's stock, a lot of times manufacturers have the wherewithal to take them to court. The individual gun owner does not. And then I suspect also the manufacturer has the wherewithal to consult with an attorney and then have the appropriate answer that the attorney would advise when agents show up to do this stuff. Whereas the average gun owner who's just sitting in his or her home and all of a sudden they get a knock at the door, they don't have the advice of counsel right away, and nor do they have the wherewithal to fight to get these items back if they're taken. So this just really strikes me as being extraordinarily heavy-handed and Gestapo-ish, knowing full well that gun owners probably can't fight back. Is that part of the plan, do you think?
I believe it is. I mean, put it this way. If ATF showed up at your door today and pulled up with a tow truck and towed your car away and said, that's illegal, that's contraband, we're taking this. Do you want to sign this abandonment form so you don't go to jail? And you chicken out and sign the form, and then they go away. Well, you don't have a car anymore. On the other hand, the guy goes, this is insane. He hires a lawyer. The lawyer files, hey, this was taken without due process of law. He'll hire an expert. The expert will show in court that, hey, in fact, this isn't even within ATF's jurisdiction. This is not a violation of anything. You'll get your car back. But at the end of the day, you'll pay more than the car's worth to get it back, to pay the legal fees. ATF's taking advantage of that process with these things. They legally are in the same predicament. They're not contraband. They're not anything ATF has jurisdiction over. They're just throwing their weight around and taking advantage of the fact that people aren't going to spend the money or will cave and just let them do what they do.
How much of this is driven by politics, Dan? I know you spent a lot of many years at the agency, and it strikes me that sometimes, depending upon who's sitting in the White House, it may drive some of that. Do you feel that this has any basis in politics, what they're choosing to do?
I'm not convinced that this one is something that they got a call from the White House on and said, hey, go after these forced reset triggers. I think this is something that it probably was no more than the people in headquarters looked at it and said, hey, if we finagle the words around enough and say, well, it does this automatically, then we can call it a machine gun. They're used to getting away with things like that. It's what they did with bump stocks, which are not machine guns, but yet now, nobody has wanted to spend $1 million to win the bump stock issue yet, but they could if they spent $1 million. That's all that's going on here. They're like, this is something that we don't like these things. They shoot really fast, just like bump stocks do. So we're going to play with the wording and pretend we really believe this and make it happen.
Dan, I'm going to go down a philosophical bent here, and you may choose not to go down it, and I certainly understand that. You know me well. We're personal friends. You know that my father was a police officer. You know that I support law enforcement. Here's where I don't, and that is when law enforcement agencies, law enforcement officers, make a conscious decision to violate their oath against it and do things that violate people's constitutional rights, knowing full well that they're doing it. And this strikes me as an example of that. When an agency knows that what they're doing really doesn't have any legal basis, but they choose to do it anyway, because they know they have the power to force the issue against a weaker adversary, which is the average gun owner or a small company, they are violating the constitutional rights of Americans, and they know it. Now, you and I have said many times, as ATF has done certain things, that, it's not the officer's fault because they haven't been educated, they don't know. I don't know that that's the case here. And I don't know what your thoughts are, having been at the agency a long time, and you've got friends, I'm sure, who are still there. What are your thoughts in that regard?
It depends on the individual. I mean, there are people in law enforcement who, given a situation like this, they either A, don't know that much about firearms, which is why we're here. We're trying to raise that bar and have been for years. They don't know enough about firearms to know, well, how does a forced reset trigger really work? For all I know, yeah, it is a machine gun, and all these, gun nuts are out there saying, no, it's not, because they don't want it to be. They're just flipping it around from what I've said about ATF. Then you have the group who, hey, my boss will back me. This isn't something the public needs. Think of what a bad guy could do if this, if that. And then they feel justified. They feel good about it. Go ahead and take it. And, I'm not worried about all these little legal details. There's a combination of reasons. But what I've seen over the years is that, if I had the chance to go back, there were things I would have done differently. I know that there were times, there were laws I enforced that I probably didn't read these things to the letter. I just followed what my bosses told me was justified procedure. Standard operating procedure is all justified, and you do it. I think of a lot of law enforcement officers actually read the definitions of a machine gun and then looked at what a forced reset trigger does. They would be left with the fact that, hey, this thing shoots super fast, but no, it does not violate any of these four definitions. Just doesn't satisfy any of them. And at that point, you're posed with this situation. Well, do I support the rights of citizens, the rights of gun owners, or do I just say, screw it, I'm taking this thing anyway because I can get away with it? Hopefully more people in law enforcement will start doing A versus B.
Well, and without getting too far down that rabbit hole, I think the reason I wanted to ask the question, and the reason why it's a worthwhile discussion, is I'm of the opinion we need law enforcement if we want to have a peaceful, orderly society. And when law enforcement does stuff like this, it causes people not to trust law enforcement, not to have any faith in them. And after all we've been through with the defund police crap and all the stuff that's gone on, this does not just from a public relations perspective of having people have faith in law enforcement, this doesn't help. And I think it's an incredibly sad thing to see this kind of overreach happen. And you're right, it may not be on the individual officer's part because they may not know any better, but then I have to ask myself, wait a minute, it's your job. And if it's your job, it's incumbent upon you to know. And if you don't know and your agency doesn't train you, then it's incumbent upon you to know. After all, you're getting paid to do the job. So that is one of the things that I think irks citizens a lot, and understandably so. Where do you see this going at this point? I mean, do you see them being successful in their attempt to do this, or is this going to be a battle fought in the courts at some point?
It's probably going to have to be fought in the courts. I mean, picture this. Rare breed is going to, from what they say, rare breed is going to continue in production. They're going to keep making them. They're going to keep selling them. And if ATF, they've already painted themselves in this corner saying, hey, these things are machine guns. They're unregistered machine guns, violations of the NFA. Are they going to stand by and let that keep happening and not take action against the company? If they do, that's going to look pretty weird. Are they just going to go out every 2 weeks and knock on doors and try to take the latest wave, and next, 2 weeks later, the next wave? Eventually, it would stand to reason they're going to take action at the source, in which case, rare breed is going to be back in court. They're going to have experts testify again and prove how no, they don't satisfy. ATF's going to lose. I mean, this is an unwinnable situation. I cannot believe ATF has painted themselves into this corner, or is in the process of doing so. But about the political thing you asked, I don't think this comes from grassroots law enforcement. I don't think that your average ATF agent would be doing anything about this if they had not been directed from above, per se, this email we brought up. The average ATF agent knows that, hey, there are gadgets out there that make a gun shoot faster, but they're not machine guns. They're okay, like binary triggers. And a street level agent's not going to get involved in this and just start deciding for himself which one headquarters approves of and which ones they don't. Heaven forbid that, all ATF agents just know the definitions and have enough firearm technology knowledge to be able to do that. What an ideal situation that would be for an agent to be able to look at something and go, okay, this violates the law because it steps outside the definition. Here's the definition. I can quote it by memory. Versus, I don't know, I'm not sure. I got to check with somebody else. This is being done by headquarters. This is being spearheaded by them, and otherwise it wouldn't be going on.
It's kind of analogous to something a buddy of mine told me. I have a friend here in California who's in law enforcement getting ready to retire. And we had a discussion back and forth one day on standard capacity magazines within the state and the screwball laws and the fact that certain decisions have gone against it and so on. I get the question all the time about those magazines and whether they can be used in your rifle. If they are legally possessed in the state, can you use them? And what it came down to is, yes, if you have a quote-unquote featureless rifle in the state of California, that yes, you can use them, but don't. And I said, what do you mean, but don't? He said, well, it depends on the rifle. And I said, okay, I don't understand. And he told me, he said, if you have that Mini 14 you've had forever, and you've got legally possessed standard capacity magazines, that is magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, then go ahead and go to the range and use them and whatever, but I would not advise you do it with your AR or your AK. Your featureless AR, your featureless AK. And I said, okay, explain to me why. He said, because every cop on the street knows that a Mini 14 is legal, has always been legal, and never been banned. But the minute you bring that black rifle out, he said, I'm going to tell you that 80 to 90% of the cops walking the street right now and walking a beat or driving a beat or whatever immediately think that rifle is got some legal problem with it. And when you put a standard capacity magazine in it, they immediately think that's an assault weapon. You're going to lose the gun, and you're never going to be able to afford to fight to get it back. So again, we get back to that whole concept of ignorance of the law is no excuse. They say to citizens, but the truth is, I'm going to reverse it. Ignorance of the law is no excuse when it comes to the law enforcement officer either. At some point or other, it's a criminal thing. It may not be a criminal offense, but philosophically, I find it criminal that agencies train officers so poorly, and that includes ATF. Like I said, I've taken your class. It's not that hard, okay? It's just not that hard. It's astounding to me that citizens can be regularly victimized as a result of this. That's all I'll say about it. I don't expect you to comment on it or whatever. I know that you've got stuff going on, but you mentioned to me another case, which is that printed card that had the lightning link printed on it, but it's not a lightning link. And that there's some oddball news associated with that. What's going on with that?
Well, the man who was making and selling those, his last name is Irvin. He was charged some time ago. He's still being held without bond. You know, these are metal cards the size of a credit card. They have lightning links printed on them. And ATF says, well, those are unregistered machine guns. True that a lightning link is a machine gun under definition 3, any part or combination of parts solely intended to convert a semi-automatic to full automatic. If you indeed have a lightning link in your hand, that's only has one purpose. You know, there's that whole argument, well, you know, maybe there's a certain kind of bottle I could use to open it with or whatever. What it says in the law is solely intended to. The person who invented the thing invented it with that sole intended purpose. So yeah, everything's arguable, but lightning link's a machine gun under definition 3. These cards have the thing printed on it, a picture printed on it. And they have the man in prison for making and selling unregistered machine guns.
I didn't know the guy was still, is he still in custody? I thought he was out.
No, he's in custody. He's been in custody for quite some time now.
Yeah, a long time.
Awaiting trial. And, you know, I'm saying, okay, so what if you went into business and you printed pictures of lightning links on the side of the fender of your car? Would your car fender now be a machine gun? You know, if you printed this on the side of a pizza cutter, a cookie sheet, a metal plate, for cooking, would that be a machine gun now? So since then, some business associate of his, he's a YouTuber, Matt Hoover, there are stories and videos all over the internet that he was arrested a few days ago also for being involved in the auto card key case. Again, I don't know what the facts are. We can watch these videos and I don't know where they're getting their information, so I don't want to be one that repeats it without facts. And he's been released since then. You know, what gets me is these YouTubers who put out this information that just adds more confusion. For instance, one person not involved in this case put out a video on this whole FRT thing versus, you know, these things that are going on right now, put out a video that ATF has changed the definition of a machine gun because now they're grabbing forced reset triggers. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. The definitions of a machine gun have not changed.
No,
that takes
it hasn't.
Years.
No, I took the class. I know what the definition is.
They might do that down the road, but it takes years. And no, they haven't. So thank you. You know, another person's out there saying that Matt Hoover deserves what he gets because he was running his mouth on the internet saying, you know, you could use one of these auto key cards to cut out the lightning link and scratch your full auto itch and then destroy it. Okay, well, last I heard, there's freedom of speech in the United States too. You know, Matt Hoover could have said, hey, let me just say me. I can say, hey, you could go out and murder somebody and bury the body and they'll never find it and you'll get away with it. Well, shame on me for saying that. That's not too smart of a thing to say, but is it illegal to say that? No. You know, so putting out these videos that just, sorry, another rant, but this stuff.
No, I think it's a worthwhile one. And I, you know, I'm not here to bag on YouTubers. I are one. I don't call myself a YouTuber anymore because I'm really trying to get people to migrate to Rumble and other things. Get away from YouTube because they're so censorship happy. But nevertheless, I think it is important that information gets sent out by people who actually know what they're talking about. So I just want to state clearly for the record, I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time, which is why I bring experts on who do. Now, I have attended Dan's class. If you haven't, I urge you to do so. You don't even have to show up. You can do it completely online. I will put links in the description for you. It is well worth it. Now, there is a lot of work to do on the back end, which I'm late on, and I have to check and see if I still have time. I don't know, because you do have a lot of work to do on the back end. And no, he will not renew it if you don't, even for me, and that's okay. But he does give you 6 months. I've just been sick and had traveling and other things, but it is something that I do wish to finish. If you're a YouTube person and you are doing anything with regard to firearms, I urge you to take his class. You'll actually understand more of what you're talking about, because he is not only an expert in this, truthfully, he's kind of the expert on this. So it's important that we get information out there that's valid. So at this point, Dan, let's just clarify some things. ATF has not changed the definition of a machine gun in any way, shape, or form. I know they might like to, but it is a long, arduous legal process, and it has not been changed. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay.
No changes.
No changes. All right. It is entirely possible that ATF may go to rare breed triggers to confiscate their stock of FRS triggers and other things, but they have not as yet done so as far as I am aware. Are you aware of them having done so, or have they not yet done so?
As of 3 or 4 days ago, as of, Lawrence DeMonico's last video, they have not.
Until they do, or unless they do, then as far as I know, there is no way for ATF to get their hands on a database of customers who have purchased FRS triggers. Would that sound reasonable?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, they're the ones who...
So unless and until they go and raid rare breed triggers, if you bought a trigger from rare breed triggers, you don't have any worry about somebody knocking on your door because they don't have the record of you having purchased it. So right. I wouldn't sit around in fear of ATF at this moment and, anticipating that they're going to come banging on your door any minute now.
Right. I mean, rare breed, if they get an order for 100 of these from, Larry's Gun Shop, their records are probably going to show just that, Larry's Gun Shop, 100 triggers. But then Larry's Gun Shop, when he sells you one, you're not filling out any paperwork. He's not taking your name down. It's not a firearm. It's just, hey, money changes hands, trigger changes hands. You walk out the door. There's no record of what first retail purchaser got that thing. So no, that's not out there.
Well, and there's no, and Larry's Gun Shop, Bill's Gun Shop, Sally's Gun Shop, or whatever is under no legal requirement to keep any record of whom they sold them to, are they?
No,
because they're not firearms.
Correct. And get back to that YouTuber thing. I have absolutely no problem with YouTubers. I'm glad to see all these videos out there. It puts out a lot of information before I see it from other sources in a lot of cases. All I was saying earlier was, let's get our facts straight before we put something out and not add to the confusion.
And this is just a little inside baseball here for you if you're watching this. I suspect that YouTube producers, video creators, suffer a little bit from the same thing that news media suffers from, and that is the race to be the first one to let you know what it is. You'll notice I get complaints a lot. I don't get them every day, but I do get them a lot, that it takes me sometimes several days to talk about a subject. There have been videos posted all over the place about this subject over the last several days. You'll notice that you haven't seen one on GunGuyTV. Now, that I have been trying to get over COVID, but that's not why. The reason why that happens almost every time is that I need to get a hold of Dan, or I need to get a hold of Eric Pratt at Gun Owners of America, or I need to get a hold of whomever the expert is to get them on the channel so they can give you the actual information and not just what my thoughts are, because my thoughts aren't going to help you any. I'm trying to be accurate here as much as I can. And then even when Dan comes on, what's he start off with? Well, I don't have a lot of information. Well, if he doesn't have a lot of information, you can guarantee that I haven't got any at all. So it is important, I think, that we try to exercise a little patience as viewers and as consumers of content, and understand that there is sort of a drive and a race to be the first one. I get it. It's competitive and so on. I understand. At the same time, and I don't want to pick on producers of other videos, because they're awesome and I'm grateful for them. But I do think sometimes it's good for us to take a breath, a pause, make sure we've got accurate information, or we've got somebody on who does, and then convey it, because otherwise it does stir up a hornet's nest. very quickly that it's not necessarily positive. I suppose sometimes it can be, but most times it isn't. Is there anything else about these issues that we ought to talk about, Dan? We've been on for a while. I don't want to...
I'll just add one more thing to that last note you made. There are a lot of YouTube folks who, all they do is take what somebody else wrote, somebody else published, then put it on their page and go, look what's going on. They don't offer any support for the source of the information, any proof, any clarification on any of the points involved. And that's something that, okay, fine. So you passed some information along, as accurate as it may or may not be. What I like to do on our Facebook page, if you're not aware, we have a Facebook page. It's called gunlearn.com, but it's on Facebook, obviously, even though it's called .com, is when I see one of these interesting articles, I'll put it on there. I'll go ahead and post somebody else's article, but then I'll add in the preamble, okay, here's some facts about what's going on here. Here's what ATF's procedure is. Here's what the federal law is. Here's what the gun technology is on this, and try to shed some light and clarify. So, I would encourage others to do that too.
Then you might check that Facebook page. There is a wealth of information there that might help you in the production of your video, whatever it is. I don't make a living do this. I try not to say that all the time, but the truth is I don't. So it doesn't matter to me. I don't see it as a competition with whatever other YouTubers are doing this. I'm not in competition with them. I don't care about that. I just want to get the information out. So if it's helpful, then hallelujah. All right. Is there anything else you want to mention?
One last thing I'd like to mention. It comes to mind. It dawns on me when I was, getting ready for this chat. If you're from the state of Florida, you know this. If you're not, you probably don't. But the state of Florida, as gun friendly as it can be, there's a law in the state of Florida that you cannot possess a gadget which enhances the speed of a semi-automatic gun. That's not the verbiage in the law. I'm not going to even try to quote it right now. But basically, if you're putting a gadget on your gun that allows it to shoot faster than you can make it shoot unassisted by the gadget, that's a felony in Florida. So you can't, even though rare breed triggers, binary triggers, all that stuff, and binary might even be okay according to who you're talking to. But the point is this: you can't have those in Florida. But what you can have is a legally registered machine gun. I have legally registered machine guns, and it's okay for me to rock and roll with those things, 800 or 1,200 rounds a minute, depending on what model it is. But you can't make your semi-automatic go any faster. So I just, you have to laugh at some of these ridiculous gun laws. I'm surprised that Florida has that law.
I go back. I mean, it's kind of an aside here, but as you know, we go back between our property and our ranch in Arizona and here in California. And every time we leave and go to Arizona, it's kind of culture shock because I realize I've entered the United States. And then if we're there any length of time and I come back, I have to remind myself, I'm leaving the United States. I'm going back to the People's Socialist Republic of California, where neither can I have any of those nice little devices we talked about, which are not NFA items, rare breed triggers or binary triggers or any of those things. I can't have a registered machine gun either in the state of California. In fact, the list of things I can't have, I think, is sometimes longer than the list of things I can. And then I go back to Arizona. It's like, whatever you want. It's such the craziest thing. I'd love to see the entire country get on the page of Arizona and Florida and Texas and some of these other much freer states. Hopefully it'll get there. I look at it this way. My son says that GunGuyTV is about fighting for the Second Amendment one episode at a time. And I think that's kind of what we're doing. Well, listen, Dan, thank you so very much for your time today. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful week. And I look forward to you coming on again.
Thanks, Joel.
Take care. Once again, I thank you very much for sitting through the entire interview. I realize these can be kind of long, but hopefully they're informative. Thank you again very much for watching. I do urge you, as I mentioned during the interview, to check out the alternative platforms that we have, because YouTube is ever more censorship happy, whereas platforms like Rumble, BitChute, and the others are not. So I do urge you to check them out. I will tell you at this point, the two most popular are Rumble and BitChute. However, at this point, it seems like like Rumble is outstripping everybody. I'm adding subscribers there more than anywhere else. So check them out. The links are in the description. Thank you again very much for watching. And wherever you go, whatever you do, be safe.